Hello everyone. In the previous session, we had seen as to how to approach psychology as an optional for UPSC CSE 2024. In this session, what I'm going to do is I'm going to delve deeper into each of those sections I had discussed in the previous session. So there are a total of 7 sections I have created. Of the 7 sections, I will be discussing about those chapters in the first 2 sections. So, which are those sections and what chapters am I talking about? So, this is the first chapter I am talking about. This chapter is the introduction chapter. So, section 1, chapter 1. What is there in this particular chapter? It lays the foundations for psychology as a subject. So obviously it's about the definition of psychology. That's where we start our entire discussion from. So here we'll be discussing about what soul is, where did this idea of soul come from. Later on we went to the meaning of mind. So later it was pretty difficult to define mind as well. So we decided, okay, fine, that's also difficult. We thought of studying the brain itself. So you don't find a location for mind. You have a location for brain. So basically we shifted our study of psychology, the focus of psychology shifted from soul to mind and then to your brain. So definition of psychology with that perspective, that viewpoint, we are going to define psychology. And then another part of this particular chapter is going to be the historical antecedents, which basically means what was there before psychology, right? Basically the roots of psychology, where did it come from? Basically every discipline comes from philosophy itself, that itself will be the root. So here we will be talking about Rene Descartes, and then we'll be talking about the earlier schools which spoke about psychology, right? So Darwin will be studying about him as well in the historical antecedents. And then the trends in 21st century. However, before we go to the trends in 21st century, so which is a part of our syllabus, we are going to talk about various schools that contributed a great deal to the development of psychology as a field. So various schools in the sense, we are going to talk about structuralism, functionalism, psychoanalysis. The most famous person under this school, or the person who started this school, is Sigmund Freud, as you might all be knowing this person. And then we are going to have behaviorism. This is another school. Humanistic school. So these are all the schools that we have, which we are going to study soon after the historical antecedents. And then comes the trends in 21st century. So these trends are nothing but how all these schools have led to the study of newer fields in psychology. So in these trends, we are going to talk about the genetics part, right? We are going to talk about the link with biotechnology. We are going to talk about psychophysics. These are all 21st century trends. Evolutionary psychology, which is again linked to the genetics part, right? Cognitive psychology, cognitive neuroscience, all of it is a part of what? The 21st century trends. So we are going to study those trends as well. And then comes psychology, whether it is a science or a social science. That's the question. In some of the colleges, it is taught as a science. In some of the colleges, it is taught as a social science, as a social studies subject, so as to speak. Is there a link between psychology and scientific method? So in this part, we are going to discuss about what science is, what scientific methods are, what are the principles on the basis of which science exists, and does psychology use all those methods or not? So basically, what we understand is that if this is science and this is a social science or a social studies, we will place psychology somewhere here, more towards science. Why? Because it is adopting scientific methods in order to study what the human behaviors and mental processes, which is of course our definition for psychology. So mental processes. In order to study these, we are adopting more and more scientific methods. How? We are going to see that across the chapters. And then psychology in relation to other social sciences and natural sciences. What are social sciences? You have economics, which is a social science, anthropology, philosophy, public administration, law, all these are social sciences. The natural sciences of physics, chemistry, math, biology. How is psychology related to that? Basically, there is a transactional approach that is taken. So we see that interdisciplinary exchange of information. So you see that psychology is helping the social sciences and it is taking the help from social sciences as well. It is helping the natural sciences, at the same time it is taking the help from the natural sciences in order to develop itself as a discipline. Psychology is quite a new field. So when we speak about the historical antecedents part, we are going to learn that it is fairly a new field. It's a newborn one, so as to speak. But the amount of research that has been generated, the amount of interest it has generated is quite enormous. So this is that part of your syllabus, and then you have application of psychology to societal problems. So we have various problems at a society level. Maybe pollution is an issue. Population explosion is an issue. You have, problems related to family issues, right? Domestic violence is an issue. Dowry is an issue. How will psychology help solve these problems? So application of psychology to societal problems. So we are going to discuss few problems where we can use psychology to solve those problems, resolve those problems. So this is what you have in chapter 1. So chapter 1, section 1, so that's what it is. The next one is going to be your chapter 2 in your section 1. That's development of human behavior, an outstanding chapter, which is going to speak more about, I would say, the development of human behavior, development of human, abilities to think, that is cognitive development, we say. Human abilities to decide what is right and wrong, that is moral development. How does it change as we grow across lifespan? How does this development happen? Physically we grow, mentally also we grow. How do the changes happen stage by stage? So this entire chapter is about that. The first part of this chapter is going to be related to growth and development. So growth is more quantitative, development includes the qualitative aspect as well. So what is the difference between growth and development? That we are going to learn first in the context of what? The human development. And then we are going to talk about the principles of development. So one of the principles is that, see, while we age, the development sometimes will be positive, sometimes it will be negative. Sir, how is that possible? Some of the aspects will be showing a positive, progress, some of them will be showing a negative progress. Say for example, as we age, as we move from one stage to another, we see that cognitively we will be growing till a particular point. After a particular point, the cognitive growth stops and it declines. This is one of the principles on the basis of which our development happens. So there are several other principles, we are going to see related to development. And then the role of genetics and environmental factors, the most famous debate that happens in psychology, the nature and nurture debate. The nature and nurture debate. Nature meaning genetics, nurture meaning environment. So how these factors determine human behavior? To what extent does it determine human behavior? For example, somebody has very good ability to memorize stuff. So memory is something which helps us retain the information. Some people have more capacity, some people have less capacity. Now, is it because they have learned to memorize better, or is it because of the genetics they have? So because of the memory we behave. So some aspects of our behavior are because of our memory itself. So memory, intelligence, our ability to think, all these things, right, can be either because of our genetics or we have learned it from the environment. To what extent is it? That is the debate. So towards the end, we are going to conclude in this debate that both play a role, but the question remains unanswered as to how much contribution is nature making and how much contribution is nurture making. We can't clearly say. For some aspects, some psychological constructs, they have been definitive results. For some of them, there is no definitive result as such. So we're going to delve into that topic in this particular section. And then you have influence of cultural factors in socialization. This topic is about what we say enculturation, acculturation, right? And how you meeting with new culture or becoming a part of new culture, how does it help you socialize? What is the process of socialization itself? Socialization is a very simple process, or if I want to define it, I would just say learning from the society, all the aspects of that particular society without much effort. You don't put the effort. Just because you are a part of that society, you learn those things. You ingrain them. They become a part of you. So what is that known as? Socialization. So how culture affects this? So that process, the entire process we are going to learn in this particular topic. And of course, that affects your human behavior, no matter what you do. And then lifespan development, characteristics and developmental tasks. So this is a wonderful topic, that is lifespan development, the characteristics and the developmental tasks. So what is this about? The lifespan development is from infancy till death. You have various stages in life. You become a child from infancy. From an infant, you become a child. Then you become an adolescent. And then you become an adult, old age, and then comes death. From here till here, how does the development happen? Across various aspects. As I told you earlier, that is the most fascinating thing you are going to learn in this particular chapter. So how do you develop cognitively? How do you develop emotionally? How do you develop socially? How do you develop, morally? All these aspects will be touched upon. So you have various theories for it. You have Freud saying something about it, right? You have one more person, wonderful person, Lev Vygotsky. He says something about it. So you have, Kohler saying something about it. So you have various people talking about different stages of life and different dimensions of development. And then you have the developmental tasks in it. What is this development? What are these developmental tasks? As in, for every age group here, for every stage, you're supposed to complete certain tasks in order to enter the next stage. If you don't complete, we say that you are fixated to the previous state itself. Say, for example, if you are supposed to be called an adolescent, you are supposed to, complete certain tasks of childhood. If you don't master those, tasks, you'll not be considered as an adolescent. So what are those tasks? These tasks are present for every stage. You're going to learn about those tasks. So these can be mental tasks, right? These are mostly mental tasks. These can be moral tasks as well. So it is stages. You just, pass the stages. So that's about it. And then promoting psychological well-being across major stages of lifespan. So psychological well-being. Well-being is a very subjective term. It is highly subjective. What is well-being for you may not be the well-being for me. What are the factors that are responsible for well-being? First, we define well-being. Then we see what are the factors that are responsible for well-being, right? And well-being means different stuff, different meanings. It has different meanings across different ages. So all those aspects we are going to cover in this particular topic, the last topic of this chapter. In section 1, the last chapter, which is of course a big chapter, I would say, is personality. This chapter is again a wonderful chapter. Why? Because we use this term quite liberally. Personality as a word is used rather liberally by us. This word and one more word we rather liberally use is character. And one more word we use liberally is self. These three words we use rather liberally. The first thing we do when we enter this chapter is define it. Define what? Personality. Along with that, we define what is self and also what character is. All the three we define. Once we have defined these three, we find the origin of the concept. Where did this idea of personality come from? And then many of the theorists or many of the schools have tried to explain what personality is from their own perspective. So the theories, when we look at them, one is psychoanalytical theory, and then you have the psychodynamic theories. It is a variant, we can say. Then you have the socio-cultural theory, interpersonal theory, developmental theories, and then humanistic, behavioristic, trait approach, type approach. So we have all these theories. All of them try to do the same thing. What personality is, and what are the components, if any? What components is it made up of? Right? How do you define a personality? What is it made up of? Say, for example, the behavioristic school says that personality is nothing more than us behaving voluntarily. Right? Whatever voluntary behaviors are there, you see them regularly, you observe them regularly. So whatever you see as what their behaviors which are consistent, only those make up their what? Personality. That's how you look at personality. According to whom? Behaviorists. Humanistic school gives a very broad view. They focus mostly on what? Self. Their idea of Personality is centered around self. Behavioristic school, they don't point out, or they don't even recognize the existence of something called as self. Humanistic school speaks about self-esteem. The most famous guy in humanistic school is Carl Rogers. So they speak about self-esteem, self-respect, right? So the perspectives they have, they are so varied. Psychoanalytical school, Freud stresses so much on unconscious aspects. He stresses on dreams. So all of these approaches are so different. They are distinct in themselves. The last two approaches, the trait approach and the type approach, these two approaches, what they do is, the trait approach, for example, speaks like this. How we are supposed to look at a personality? We are supposed to look at a personality on the basis of what are all the traits that make up a personality, what are the components that are there. So trait approach is more like, intelligence is one of the aspects you are supposed to look for, one of the trait you are supposed to look for in personality. There's another trait you are supposed to look for. So it lists out the traits you are supposed to look out for. Whereas type approach, this is a very simple approach. So you create the types of personalities and you put a person into a personality type A, type B, ऐसा. So this is a very simple approach. It does not have that much, it does not have so much currency, so as to speak. People do not accept it so much. And then you have the measurement of personality. There are various measures of personality. How to measure personality? It is, again, a rather subjective way of measuring. So they use the projective tests. For example, one is called the TAT, thematic apperception test, right? So then you have the pencil paper test. Rorschach ink blot tests is one more. So where you are given pictures, right? Or pictures are given, especially in the thematic apperception test, pictures are given. So you are supposed to create a story on the basis of the pictures you see. Ink blot test, ink blot on a piece of paper, right? Blotting paper, you put the ink and you get a shape, right? You get a symmetrical shape on it by closing the paper, and looking at that, you are supposed to say what you see, right? You have to picturize something and you have to say what it is about. And once you say it, on the basis of that, the psychologist or the person who is measuring your personality, trying to evaluate your personality, is going to come up with, this person is able to imagine these things because of such and such traits he has. So what is this? Rorschach ink blot test. So likewise, you have many other tests. So pencil paper test is nothing but you have a 16 PF, right? Personality 16 personality factors test, right? So all these are what? Measurements of personality. None of the tests are able to clearly measure your personality, right? So they are close estimates, we can say. They are close estimates. Can we fake these tests? Yes, people do fake the tests. However, the idea is to generate such tests which are standardized, and as less as possible, people will be able to fake it, right? But after taking the test multiple times, people are able to fake it. Okay. Next, the Indian approach to personality. Here we'll be discussing about yoga is one. Ayurveda. According to Ayurveda, what personality is? According to Jainism, Buddhism. So we take help from various ancient scriptures, right? As well as ancient, cultures, ancient societies, and see the Indian approach to personality. And then training for personality development. So what can be done to train a person in personality development? So what are all the steps that are to be taken, right? So how do you train a person, right, to improve the personality? The latest approaches like the big five theory, this is the most acceptable theory today when we speak about which is also called the ocean, right? Ocean theory, because the five traits we are talking about, they are ocean, right? That's an acronym. And then this is the most acceptable theory as of today. And then the notion of self in different traditions. So I told you, I spoke about self in the starting, right? In the starting of the chapter itself, we define it. Later on, the idea of self across traditions, various traditions, including the Indians, right? Indian aspect of self compared to the Western aspect of self. This is where we see the juxtaposing of ideas of self. So the Western idea of self, which is the humanistic idea of self, and we juxtapose it with, we compare and contrast with the Indian idea of self, the Eastern idea of self. So this is what we do in this particular chapter. That is the section 1, chapter 3. So that's the end of section 1. So 3 chapters are done. We are going to look at other 3 chapters, which is section 2. So in the section 2, all the 3 chapters, remember, all the 3 chapters I discussed in section 1 belong to the paper 1 itself. However, when we look at the section 2, in section 2 we have 3 chapters again. So the 3 chapters of the 3 chapters, so the first chapter C1 and C2 belong to paper 1, whereas C3 belongs to paper 2. Okay, these 3 chapters we studied together. So this first chapter in section 2 is the methods of psychology. So the methods of psychology, basically what are the methods we use in psychology in order to do the research and to do the experiments. First we will learn about what are the types of research we use in psychology. Same types of research you also use in sociology. Basically social sciences ka methods hai. So what are the types of researches we do? Descriptive research, evaluative, diagnostic and prognostic. These are the types of research we do. And most of the research that happens will fall under descriptive and diagnostic. Most of the research falls in this category. And then what methods do we use to do the research? Survey method, observation method, case study, experiments. What is this about? See, this is about the goal of the research. This is about how do we meet this goal? How do we meet this goal? So survey, observation, case study, experiment. So for example, case study. Case study is about you take one particular case, you find something, you generalize it for the rest of the population. Experiments, experimental method. What do? You have a control group, you have an experimental group. What is a control group? For which you don't change any variable. Experimental group, you change a variable and see if the changes are happening. Now you compare with the control group. If the changes have happened, yes, it is because of the variable change. So what is this? Experiments. So we use various methods of research. What are the characteristics of experimental design, non-experimental design, quasi-experimental design? These will be discussing in detail within the chapter. What is the experimental design? A design means how do you conduct an experiment? Starting from how do you select the participants in the experiment till you write a report on what the experiment, what are the findings you get from the experiment. Till that point you should have a design including the instructions that you give to the participants, right? So do the participants know about the experiment or not? All these things will be there where in the design. Okay, so non-experimental designs. that is when experiment is not possible. In some of the situations, experiments are not possible. Say for example, what is the impact of alcohol on domestic violence? Now you can't cause a person to drink and check whether he does domestic violence or not. So in such cases, you are supposed to use what? Non-experimental designs, right? Quasi-experimental design, it falls between the experimental and non-experimental. So it falls between these two. So how does this work? We'll be learning in this chapter. Focused group discussions, brainstorming, and grounded theory approach. These three again are the methods we use in psychology in order to generate, especially here it is generate to generate more ideas. Same thing with brainstorming, right? Grounded theory approach is an approach we use to develop a theory from nothing, to find a solution, to develop a theory or to find a solution to a problem bottom up. So it is known as grounded theory approach. So we'll be learning about these methods in the section 2, chapter 1. Next, section 2, chapter 2. Look at this. Major steps in psychological research. Starting from what? Formulation of the research problem, right? Basically you start from the statement, as in what the problem is, what are you doing the research on. That's where you started. After that there are various steps, including hypothesis formulation, and then hypothesis testing and all that. Towards the end you do the report writing. That is the last step. So we have some 8 steps. We are going to go into the details of each of these steps. So those are the major steps in psychological research. Fundamental research versus applied research. What is fundamental research? What is applied research? Here we are going to talk about action research as well. Basically basic research and action research. This is also one aspect we are going to touch upon. What are the methods of data collection? Data collection methods. It can be a survey, it can be a questionnaire, right? Surveys can be done in many ways. Mail survey, telephonic survey. What are the advantages and disadvantages? Observation is one more way of collecting the information, right? These are all data collection methods in an experiment or within a research. How do we do all these things? What are the advantages and disadvantages? Research designs. So in the previous chapter we spoke just about the characteristics of various research designs. Here we are going to see how those designs are created in the first place. So you have several experimental designs. You also have non-experimental designs, quasi-experimental designs, right? You have all these designs, and within each of these designs you have multiple designs again, right? So factorial design is one of them, right? Factorial design. And then you have item response theory and the statistics part. You also have the statistics part in this. Okay, so that is ANOVA, t-test. Okay, so ANOVA, t-test, factorial analysis, all of these, regression, correlation. So you have all these statistical methods as well within this chapter itself. So that is chapter number 2 of section 2. And this is the chapter I was talking about. This chapter is in paper 2. The nature of individual differences. This chapter is about psychological measurement of individual differences. So how do individuals differ from one another? Why do they differ in the first place? Right? So what is the nature of individual differences? To what extent do they differ? And then how do we measure it using our psychological tests? But can you produce tests for all the individuals? Because individuals are different, they are so unique from one another. Can we have some standard test to measure? Say for example, people in US are so different from people in India. Can we have a same test to measure them? Measure the individual differences. For that, we are supposed to create what? Standardized psychological tests. We say these are culture-free tests. As far as possible, we are supposed to develop what? Culture-free tests. So culture should not be an impediment to make a psychological measurement. Yes. So the characteristics of standardized psychological tests, construction of them. So when we speak about construction, we'll be speaking about the validity of the tests, reliability of the tests, how to ensure these, and then we will be talking about types of psychological tests. So is it given for a single person, or is it a group test? Can it be a speed based test? Is it an aptitude test? Is it an intelligence test? So there are different types of psychological. Some of them are verbal tests, some of them are non-verbal tests. Yes. So is it a speed test? Is it a power test? So there are different types of psychological tests that have been developed for various psychological constructs, to measure various psychological constructs. So all these we'll be learning in this particular topic. Can the psychological tests be used? Yes, in various areas they can be used. In schools they can be used. For checking abnormalities it can be used. For hiring people in organizations they can be used. For hiring people in the military, right? It can be used. For having tests on various deficiencies, right? Mental deficiencies. You can use them. Can they be misused? Yes, they can be misused as well. A great deal can be misused. What are the limitations of psychological tests? As I told you earlier, they can't give a real picture. They can't give the exact picture of all the psychological abilities or psychological constructs. Some of the psychological constructs you can't even measure directly. For example, attitudes. You can hide them so easily. You can't measure them so easily, right? Easy to hide. Whenever it is easy to hide, it becomes a limitation of a psychological test. While we have tests, it is difficult to measure. And then ethical issues. Ethical issues. Especially ethical issues pop up whenever you try to do the experiments. Social acceptance is difficult. Privacy becomes an issue. Whether you did you take the informed consent before conducting a test? That becomes another issue. So we'll delve into the ethical issues that arise because of the psychological tests that are done. Even if a person has given the consent to be a part of a test, right? Does it leave a impact on a person? A very simple example, like you want to check whether a particular test is good for IQ, measuring IQ. So you developed your own test. Now you gave it for a person. That person got a very low score. Now you inform that person you got very low score. Now what impact will it have on that person in the days to come? So all these issues, right, will be covered under this topic. So this is section 2, chapter 3. So total we have covered 6 chapters. Out of 6 chapters, 5 chapters belong to paper 1. 1 chapter belongs to paper 2. We have how many chapters to go? We still have 22 chapters to go, spread across 5 sections. So in the next video, I'll be taking up 1 more section or 2 more sections, right? So please watch out for that video, right? You'll get a glimpse of what is there in the syllabus. And towards the end, right, towards the end, we are going to have The book list, right? The exact book list that is required for psychology as an optional for civil services examination. Also, the batches for all the optional subjects that are provided at Legacy IAS will be starting mid-September. Contact the front desk. So the number will be scrolling below. So you just contact the front desk. They will give you the exact date on which the optional classes will start, and also the optional subjects that are provided at Legacy IAS. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day. Thank you.